Hello, Tucson Unified families. Welcome to District 1, our new podcast with Dr. Gabriel Trujillo, Superintendent of Tucson Unified. Dr. Trujillo, welcome to your podcast. Can you tell us about the name?
Hello, I'm excited to be here. And yeah, I think the name District 1, what we wanted to do is we wanted to create a name that would signify who we are as a district. We are the state of Arizona's first publicly organized traditional public school district, over 150 years old. And then the second reason I felt that District 1 would be the best name for our communication is because we want to be your first option to educate your kids. So we want to always be parents' first option, and we want to be a teacher's first option or one of our education support professionals' first option for employment. So District 1 it is.
I'm Michelle Valenzuela. I work in the communications department. Usually I will be the other voice on the podcast. And this is something that's new for our district. And maybe, and for Southern Arizona, I don't know if any other districts are doing a podcast for communication. So what made you want to do one?
The Tucson Unified School District is Southern Arizona's largest public school district. We are essentially the public school district for the entire city of Tucson. We're more than 240 square miles. It's a lot of different communities, a lot of neighborhoods. We have thousands and thousands of employees, thousands of students. And so sometimes information doesn't get out as quickly as we would like it to be. And when that happens, sometimes there's miscommunication, or sometimes parents or students or community members or even employees have a misunderstanding of information, and then it becomes sort of an incorrect narrative or an incorrect understanding. So I felt like just having a weekly opportunity to address the community, the employees, the students around singular topics would create an opportunity for clarity and give an opportunity to communicate the most timely information to the broadest audience.
Each week we'll be basically interviewing you, talking with you about as you said, a singular subject. This week we're going to talk about the guidelines for students' rights and responsibilities. Can you tell us about what the guidelines for student and responsibilities is and how the document is used and what's going on with this?
So the Student Disciplinary Handbook in the Tucson Unified School District, it's entitled The Guideline for Student Rights and Responsibilities. Many of you out there recognize it by its abbreviation, the GSRR. And there is probably no bigger item of concern amongst our teachers and our community and our parents than the GSRR.
How confident are you that we'll be able to get through this process, through all the reviews, and end up with a new policy for next year?
I'm pretty confident. Kids have been my life for 22 years. This is the only profession that I've ever been in. I know teenagers. I know how they think. I know what kind of decisions they make in a school setting. I know how discipline works. I know how effective discipline, I know what that looks like in the classroom. I know what it looks like at the school level. We have amazing teacher leaders. They know what needs to be done inside their classrooms. Our campus principals are extremely knowledgeable. They're on my team. My point is we have stakeholders from across the system that have the knowledge and the expertise to be able to come together and say, this is a document that can work. And consequences that do feature restorative practice-based consequences. I feel we could put together a proposal of those recommendations that would be met positively.
I know that having looked at it, there are charts that show if a child does something, here are the possible disciplinary actions. How does it play out in a school, and how is it used? What can people expect to see in that document?
The way the Guideline for Student Rights and Responsibilities is laid out is behavioral infractions are categorized in categories of severity between 1 and 4. So we have level 1 behaviors and behavioral infractions, level 2, level 3, level 4, and 5. Level 4 and 5 infractions are what we consider to be the most serious threats to student safety and the environment of the school. The examples of level 4 and 5 behavioral infractions: assault, aggravated assault, sale and distribution of drugs, weapons possessions. As you move down the lower end, Category 1 or Level 1, Level 2, those tend to be more classroom-specific behavioral infractions like truancy, ditching, or unexcused absences, if you will, inappropriate use of cell phones. Then there are consequences that are attached. If there is a Level 1, which is a classroom-level infraction, like, say, ditching or repetitive truancy, that consequence may be something like detention. But a behavioral infraction such as the sale and distribution of drugs, which would be a Level 5, that's an expulsion hearing. So the key point that our parents, our public, and our listeners need to understand is the general gist of the GSRR is you have these behaviors. They're categorized across 5 levels of severity, and each level of severity has its own set of consequences. The crux of the debate around the Guideline for Student Rights and Responsibilities is its format, its readability, and then its content.
Who makes the decision between a minor aggressive act and a aggressive act or an assault, or, through those levels? Who are the decision makers? Teachers, principals? Who makes those calls?
That's a great question. Now, from a policy perspective, the entire Guideline for Student Rights and Responsibilities, it's the result of a collaborative process. Anytime that we revise and edit, like we're doing now, that requires a lot of collaboration with our plaintiff representatives, the Mendoza plaintiff representatives and their legal representation, the Fisher plaintiff representatives and their legal representation, and then the Department of Justice, who is sort of the monitor, if you will. We really do have to collaborate with them and reach consensus. So there's that policy end of it that I'd like our listeners to understand. Now, at the point of implementation is what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. It's the administrator in charge of investigating the incident, and they do a really good job of examining evidence, interviewing witnesses. Of course, the student involved always gets the right to make a statement. There's always parent involvement. We notify our parents. And so what the administrator will do is gather all the evidence and then look at the Guideline for Students' Rights and Responsibilities and determine what the appropriate charge is.
And you have mentioned a couple times that we're revising the GSRR for next year. What is going to be different?
There's really 3 broad changes we're making to practice at the campus level, and then there's 3 broad changes we're making at the policy level. So first, let's travel to the school. What our vision for Tucson Unified is, and my dream, is to create a classroom environment that is supportive of teachers and students, that doesn't pit students and teachers against each other, that preserves instruction and that instructional time. Now, in order to do that, and in response to teacher feedback, we have to make it significantly easier and more accessible for teachers to get support when students make poor decisions or when students are being disruptive. So the changes that we want to make at the school level is we want to make it significantly easier for teachers to get administrative support with students that are making poor choices and being overly disruptive and that are interrupting the learning environment. So the biggest thing we're going to do system-wide across all 89 schools is wherever you are in the district, no teacher should be required to engage in anything more than 3 interventions for classroom level discipline. And what that means is 3 interventions, 3 opportunities for teachers to correct student behavior, and then it passes on to the office. So what that means is I'm at school A and I have a student, and that student comes in late 3, 4, or 5 times. All right, I intervene. I call the parents, I let them know what's going on. I document it. Okay, there's intervention number 1. Maybe a week passes. The student pulls out his phone. I give the student a few opportunities to put the phone away, but the phone keeps presenting itself, and the phone's not going away. Now I have to do intervention number 2. I pull the kid after my class, we sit down, I clarify expectations, I again call a parent. So there's a second intervention, okay? Then a couple weeks go by, and then I have the student is ditching. The monitor brings the kid to my class. He's out on a bathroom pass. They found him out in the PE field, okay? So then one more time, I try to contact the counselor. We call home. At that point, okay, I've got 3 different behaviors now. So if there's a 4th behavior, that will now become a referral to the administration so that the teachers can get that immediate support. That's really broad change number one that we're expecting. Broad change number two at the classroom level is when the teacher finally gets to the point of submitting a referral. We expect that that referral is going to be processed, and we expect that there's going to be clearly communicated timelines from the administration to the teacher. Common concerns that I hear from a lot of teachers from a lot of schools that I visit is that they write a referral and they don't hear from anybody ever. And then the kid shows back up in the room. If kids see another kid who's made poor choices show up the next day and nothing has happened, it just really sets a challenging tone for the teacher. But on a level 4 and a level 5, which are more serious, the school-wide expectation is they're dealing with it same day. So if there's a fight, it's a same day. If there's an assault, it's always the same day. Receive the referral, consequence a kid, communicate with parents, feedback to the teacher.
How will teachers know what they're supposed to do? How will kids know that there's a change should it pass through all the steps and become the new GSRR? How are we communicating that so that kids kind of know that this is going to perhaps escalate a little faster than it has in the past, and the teacher's expectations?
That will be a huge part of the professional development we do in the fall, but obviously the GSRR has to go through all the appropriate revisions and ultimately board approval.
And we should note that the draft of the proposed new GSRR is available online, and we're seeking feedback.
We want feedback.
Yes, from all stakeholders. You can find it now on www.TUSD1.org. There's a form that you can fill out to offer your feedback. It's also on every school website, and for employees, it's on the intranet, our internal website. So we would love to have everyone review that and give feedback. That'll be used and shared with the governing board and the administration as we kind of move forward, right?
Absolutely. The GSRR, the revisions process, is one of the biggest projects and initiatives that we're engaged in. Our board has provided clear direction. On our team's end, we're assembling working groups of parents from the African American Student Services Department. We're also assembling a working group of parents from the Mexican American Student Services Department, so we also have representative parents from the Mexican American community. We're also gathering a working group of special education parents, and I recognize how hard those parents work so that we have a broad range of parents and stakeholders and teacher leaders and administrators providing feedback to the governing board.
And you mentioned earlier sort of the two major categories of change that you're proposing for next year: the classroom and then the policies. And I kind of got you off track there, so we didn't get to the policies. So what are the major policy changes?
There's really 3 big revisions that we're looking to make, or proposals, if you will. The first one is fights. There's really 3 categories of physical altercations that can play out on a campus. You have the worst possible kind, which is aggravated assault. Then you have assault. Still, you have an unwilling participant, but it's less severe than an aggravated assault. There may not be an injury, but you do have a willing participant that's walking, minding his or her own business, and is just physically attacked. Maybe 2, 3, 4 punches, doesn't land in the hospital, but it's an assault, okay? Then you have what's called a mutually agreed upon fight, a mutually agreed upon altercation. You have 2 students. They have multiple opportunities to tell somebody at the school that there's a conflict pending. So you have kids messaging each other on Snapchat across a period of time, and they choose not to tell anybody in the school, a counselor, an administrator, even a monitor, that there's a conflict brewing. The same 2 kids find each other in the cafeteria. They both throw their hands up at each other, call each other out, and now you have a physical altercation. They had multiple opportunities across time to tell somebody about the conflict and de-escalate it, and they had several opportunities to walk away. So We want to now bring that into the GSRR as a separate situation and say that that's a fight. And that in that situation, a fight does warrant an off-campus suspension. But we still love the kids and we still want them back. The off-campus suspension is mainly for the two parties to cool off. So what we're proposing is in a situation of a fight that we have a 3-day off-campus suspension, but we eliminate 2 days if the two students are agreeable to come back, sit down with a counselor, and participate in a mediation or a restorative conference and sign a peace pact. Okay, and that's something new that we're bringing in. Or hundreds of students see those two fighters walking around minutes after a fight. That is devastating for campus climate and culture, for a feeling of safety and security. And it also doesn't give our campus teams time to de-escalate the conflict so it doesn't escalate further.
I know there are sort of a couple of schools of thought on off-campus suspensions. Some people believe that they're very necessary to keep a peaceful environment in the school, and if someone's being very disruptive, they should be taken away from that campus. And then other people think that it's not effective because an out-of-school suspension can get kids further behind, they miss instructional time. This sounds like it might be sort of something right down the middle where they have the cooling off period, but it's not a long time and they have an opportunity to get back sooner. Do you think that that's going to perhaps bring those schools of thoughts together?
I pride myself on having a career that has been centered on keeping kids in school. Even kids who have made the poorest choices, and I can reflect and really think about those kids in my career, I always viewed it that my job is to keep them in school. I think I'm not alone in former principals or current principals that have broken up a fight and you think it's dead and you start walking the kids back to the principal's office and they get away from you and they start throwing more punches. So you gotta have that time to cool off, and sometimes it is and a lot of times it is in the best interest of the student, his or herself, so that we can prevent further escalation or further poor choices.
And I want to remind everyone who's listening that we are looking for that feedback on the proposed changes. You can find the document and a form to fill out at www.TUSD1.org and on each school website. One question that sort of has been a thing that we've been dealing with, especially since January, the school threats. Are those addressed in the current GSRR? Kids making social media threats and things like that. How do we deal with those in a disciplinary setting?
Those are the most serious infractions in the Guideline for Student Rights and Responsibilities. Making a threat against a school is a level 5. So you have two categories of threats that we're receiving right now. You have the school threats, and the school threats are, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to this school, okay? Mm-hmm. But then you also have general threats. So we wanted, this current GSRR we have doesn't differentiate. It also doesn't differentiate between threats that we find out are really just made out of poor choices in humor, where we've been able to work with campus administrative teams and still administer consequences, but not at the level 5 level. Mm-hmm. So we're looking for a different charge that will give us more flexibility when we run into those situations.
Is there anything else that you want people to know about the proposed changes, or your ideas for handling discipline in schools and in the district?
The only other thing is in the GSRR, like our last major policy proposal, is to draw a very, very distinct line between drug and alcohol possession and usage by individual kids and the sale and distribution and sharing of drugs and alcohol. If you're selling, dealing, sharing, distributing drugs or alcohol, you will be expelled. We are not playing around with that. That is the most serious threat to school safety that contributes to the plague of this nation with regard to drug and alcohol dependency. We all know the destructive nature of addiction and what happens to kids. So there is we're not softening up on that language. So I want to be very clear. So that's probably the other big difference they'll see in the GSRR. And something that I and a lot of other educators believe in is that line with regard to drug and alcohol offenses. There's a very clear line in a direction that we go for sale and distribution versus young people trapped in the throes of addiction.
And we're rolling into prom season right now. I know there are some proms on Saturday. Do these rules apply just on campus or at school events? You know, a lot of them are held at hotels and things like that. Do the rules apply for prom?
The rules apply for prom. Prom is a school event, and graduation is a school event. Myself, having been a veteran of several graduations and several proms, those are probably the two most frequent occurrences in which administrators will discover that students have made poor choices of all kinds, but a popular one is the choice to use alcohol or drugs on those two occasions.
Talk to your kids.
Talk to your kids, make great choices, and be safe.
Yes. So I think that wraps up our first podcast. We will be doing this weekly. And if anyone out there has an idea for a topic or has questions following up on this, you can email them to answers@TUSD1.org, and we will take those ideas, and we will also answer as many questions as we can through that email. If you're interested in different avenues for learning things about the district, Dr. Trujillo does a weekly newsletter internally, and you can also find that www.facebook.com/Tucson Unified. We're on Instagram. We're not yet on Snapchat, but you can also find us on Twitter. So there's all sorts of ways to get news about the district.
Thank you. And to all of the teachers out there, thank you for your leadership. And thank you for doing all the amazing work that you're doing. And all of our blue and white collar education support professionals, happy belated Blue Collar Support Professionals Week.
Thank you.
See you next time.